everyone. I'm Lorna Condon, an ESA board member and the senior curator of the Library and Archives at Historic New England. It's my pleasure this afternoon to introduce Corey Serrant to you. Corey's presentation is entitled Gay Liberation Movement of the 1970s and 1980s. Corey is a specialist of the African American Art Department at Swan Galleries, as well as Associate Director for the LGBTQ+ department. After completing his undergraduate degree, Corey interned for the National Academy of Design, 303 Gallery, and Jack Shainman Gallery. He has worked for Salon 94 and Eric Firestone Gallery, most recently as Associate Director, where he focused on gallery sales and working with artists' estates. Corey has served as a juror for the MFA thesis at the School of Visual Arts in New York. He has participated in lectures at the Leslie Lohman Museum of Art, the Appraisers Association of America, and the LGBT Historic Sites Project. Please welcome Corey this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, and I am terribly excited to be here and to present to you all today. And yeah, this is really wonderful. It's my first time. Yes, thank you. Yes. Thank you. So my presentation today is outside of Stonewall. I'm going to start today with looking at LGBTQ+ life before Stonewall. Here we have a diary and a picture of a young man who's a Navy veteran in Los Angeles after World War II. Quite a few GIs who were active in World War II actually were able to find their homosexuality within and after the war. And so many of them, like this young man right here, kept diaries listing their exploits and their traverses and their daily lives as gay men, listing their encounters with other gay men and in other aspects of a gay life, which was very under the radar within the 1950s. Here we have a documentarian photograph of two gay men in the Night Owl Bar. You can tell that these two men are a couple by their body language, the legs overlapping, and material culture from the 1950s documenting gay lives is very scarce. This image here is of the latter, an image executed by Lorraine Hansberry, writer of Raisin in the Sun. This image was sort of patroned by the organization The Daughters of Abilities, one of the early pre-Stonewall organizations in which a lot of gay people were able to sort of find communities and find homes. A lot of lesbians were in The Daughters of Abilities, and a lot of gay men were affiliated with the Mashatine Society. These organizations had groups and organizations in Washington, D.C., Chicago, New York, and on the West Coast. This document right here pertains to homosexuality and citizenship in Florida, titled The Purple Pamphlet from 1964. It was originally a original report by the Commission by the Florida State Legislature to investigate an alleged epidemic of homosexuality, including infiltration into agencies supported by state funds by practicing homosexuals. The resulting report is filled with moral outrage. Also included are several erotic photographs, including full-page shots of bondage and oral sex being performed in a public restroom, a glossary of homosexual terms and deviant acts extended into central pages. So the Florida Legislative Committee published this with the intent to sort of demonize homosexuality and the aspects and sort of to have it criminalized in the state of Florida in 1964. This is an issue of The Advocate from 67 to 75, and it was one of the early sort of gay rights publications that predate Stonewall. Next, we have a work from Tom of Finland, A Graphite on Paper with Fixative, from 1968, and it was also published in Cake magazine. And I included this in the presentation to the fact that Tom of Finland, as an illustrator, he used his practice as an illustrator as a form of catharsis within conflict and resolution as a gay man and trying to articulate himself and his community. This is a photograph from Lloyd Yearwood of a drag club in Harlem circa the 1960s. I included this because it's a documentary and photograph, and it shows that gay life extended well into the early part of the 20th century, earliest going back into the Harlem Renaissance, when gay balls and the drag scene really came to life. Next, we have a photograph from James Baldwin, author and advocate for civil rights movement and gay and lesbian rights, circa 1965. Here we have a broadside from Andy Warhol's My Hustler. Warhol's film, which took on the themes of gay obsession, which were new to the canon of American film at the time, was shot over an LSD-fueled Labor Day weekend on Fire Island. It is the story of an older man and his dialer hustler, companion of a New York weekend destination. Although the New York Times referred to it as a fetid Beach Boy film, the film proved to be a financial success for Warhol. This image here is a silver print of a sit-in from 1966. So a lot of documentarians and historians say that Stonewall itself was not the catalyst of the gay rights movement, because there were many other facets of the gay community that was taking segues to gay liberation. If you think of Frank Kameny and his fight with the federal government because he lost his job because they found out that he was a gay man. And so the front was being fought on the legal basis, the judicial basis, and socially. Next, we have a printed handbill from 1969, Communications, Step 1. A handbill for public discussion of homosexuality in regards to church, city, law, and society, asking questions such as, should the police protect property or morals? Are bar raids necessary? During the late 60s, bar raids of gay bars, particularly in New York, were very frequent and very damning to its patrons, because those bars were the sole spaces of safe spaces for them and their communities. Next, we have a group of issues of Gay Power containing multiple volumes. It was the self-proclaimed New York's first homosexual newspaper. Gay Power set out to be bold and provocative. And now we step into Stonewall on that hot summer night of June 28th, 1969, in which one of those bar raids happened, and finally, the patrons of said bar decided to fight back. Here we have a Manhattan gay scene guide from 1969, summer edition. This guide begins with reviews of 46 bars. Most are depicted in positive terms, with the notable exception of the Stonewall, notorious for its mafia ownership. Once one of the most popular gay dance bars in town, observers note that despite go-go boys installed on platforms to bring back the customers, as well as the recent interior renovations, both have failed to attract the dwindling crowds, the crowds resulting from the representation of the management, quote unquote. Other sections are devoted to the baths, clothing shops, coffee shops, homophile organizations, hotels, groovy movie theaters, parks, private clubs, restaurants, and a long essay on Manhattan's cruising scene. Here we have a group of 13 gay rights protest flyers that were executed weeks after the Stonewall riot and published by the Mattachine Society. Most of these flyers were credited by by the Mattachine, and a few more were issued by the newly formed organization, the Gay Liberation Front. And here are a few of the images and what consisted of them. Here's a photograph from Peter Hujar, Portrait of an Agitator as a Tough Man, Jim Serrant. Jim Serrant was an early LGBTQ activist and participated in the Stonewall Riot the summer of '69. He was a founding member of the Gay Liberation Front, the first post-Stonewall lesbian and gay activist organization. Serrant was a founding member of HEAL and ACT UP, and also a founding member of the New York Lesbian and Gay Community Services Center. At this time the photograph was taken, he was in a romantic relationship with Hujar. Here we have a broadside that states, "Homosexuals are American citizens too," signed from Philadelphia's annual Reminder March. Annual gay rights marches were held in front of the Philadelphia Independence Hall every year on the 4th of July from '65 to '69. These annual reminder days were among the first organized by the gay rights protest in the U.S. So after Stonewall's 1969, from June 28th to July 6th, there was a proliferation of marches and protests and the rise of social peaceful activism from New York, San Francisco, DC, Portland, Seattle. Here's a print of one of those marches from photographer Suzanne Polly. Here is a signed letter by John Wojciechowicz. I found this one particularly interesting. He was the leader of an ill-fated New York bank robbery in 1972. The bank was surrounded by police, and after holding hostages for 14 hours, Wojciechowicz was arrested and one of his accomplices was killed. He was stated that his motive was to pay for the gender confirmation surgery of his partner, a trans woman named Elizabeth Eden. The story was immortalized in the 1975 film Dog Day Afternoon, starring Al Pacino. Offered here is the correspondence file between Wojciechowicz and a journalist, Jeannie Barnett of California, during the period of his imprisonment. Included also are 8 signed letters and notes from him, and 3 typed carbon retained responses. Here's another issue of Gay Power, and this is believed to be the first printed and published print from Robert Mapplethorpe in May 1970. Here's an image from Fred W. McDowell, the first Stonewall Anniversary March held on June 28, 1970. This illubulant and optimistic image is considered the most iconic of gay liberation. No image better captures the spirit of the first year after the Stonewall Rebellion. The image was used on a poster to recruit people for the first Gay Pride March in June 1970, on the first anniversary of the Stonewall riots. Here's an image from Peter Hujar saying, "Come out." He took this image originally and then turned into this multiple, and it's extremely iconic, which thenceforth sprung this poster from Sue Nguyen, Peter Hujar, and Sujan Bevier. It's an offset litho poster. After Hujar's image was used by the Gay Liberation Front, it was co-opted and repurposed by Sue. She combined the photograph with a mandala bearing the words, "Let Go." The resulting poster in red, orange, and purple on soft gold was offered through the pages of Come Out for $1. Here are 2 pins from the Gay Liberation Front. The Gay Liberation Front, founded in '69, and it was the only reference we have to this button with an address of 1511 West 7th Street. Here is a poster made by Donna Gottschalk, offset litho poster from 1971. Originally known as a photographer, she began to be recently appreciated as a poster maker and her name within the world of photography. She was an early member of the Gay Liberation Front in the 1960s. This poster and the image taken from her 1970 photograph Sleepers in Limerick, Pennsylvania, was ubiquitous and popular in its time, but is still very scarce. Here is an early image from Joan E. Bryan, better known as Jeb, of Sharon Dealey, a silver print, with with the first edition original issue of The Furies, the lesbian feminist monthly journal. Here are a group of images from the Gay Activist Alliance, a group of 7 photographs of the Rockefeller Five and GAA posters. In 1970, 12 members of the GAA entered the Republican State Committee headquarters in New York to demand the repeal of laws against the gay community. 5 members of the Gay Activist Alliance, later the Rockefeller Five, were arrested for criminal trespassing during the sitting. They were refused an audience, but were later acquitted of these charges. They are depicted here in front of the criminal courts with other demonstrators from the GAA showing their support. And here are a few more images from that same protest. Here's one of my personal favorite images from the early 70s from Diane Arbus, 2 men dancing at a drag ball in New York City, circa 1970. Here are 5 issues of the Stonewall News magazine. The first issue bears the full title, Come Out, a newspaper by and for the gay community, while later issues are titled Come Out, a liberation forum for the gay community. Here is a poster from their antithesis organization stating Come Out is dead, also known as Gay Male Liberation is Dead. This pamphlet was issued in reaction to the controversial winter 1972 issue of Come Out magazine, which proved to be its last. 2 articles in that issue's S&M and the Revolution and A Cock-Sucking Seminar were regarded as deeply offensive by many of the magazine's lesbians and their allies, contributing to its collapse. This tabloid-style pamphlet is a direct response penned by several Come Out mainstays, including Deborah Moldovan, Morgan Muriel Child, Stephen Brooks, and Perry Brass, the later 2 apologizing for their decision to run the offending articles. And so it was also published in Freaking Fag, Revolutionaries, New York's Gay Liberation Front. Here's a poster from the Madison Gay Liberation Front, assuming the original title from Manet's Déjeuner sur l'herbe. And in this, they titled Our Lives, Wisconsin Places, this date as an event in 1973, and quotes a participant. There were lots of people, lots of sunshine, and lots of good friends. So this was one of the offshoots of Stonewall, and it's sort of post-bearers of the gay liberation movement. Third World Gay Revolution, pair of revolutionary greeting cards issued by the short-lived splinter group, the Gay Liberation Front. Third World Gay Liberation spun off from the Gay Liberation Front in 1970 in reaction to both racism in the gay power movement and homophobia in the Black Power movement. They remained active as a separate organization for only a few months. One of these holiday cards reads, Celebrate, on the outside, and opens to a lavender image of the word gay in the shape of a hand of a grenade. The other shows a Christmas tree with Joy to the World on the outside. Inside, a trail of gunpowder and weapons lead to the tree. Under the header, The Gay Revolution Has Come. Here are a series of images by Marie Udea, a pair of real photo postcards from the 1977 San Francisco Gay Day Parade. She was a photojournalist born in Japan, and upon moving to San Francisco in the 1970s as a foreign correspondent, she captured an array of LGBTQ+ events for international publications. Here are some photo documentary works from Clinton Artut, from an archive from a San Francisco activist and drag performer also known as Nurse Naomi. Clinton Tuft was a San Francisco antique dealer, activist, and active participant in the local pageant scene as Naomi Murdoch or Nurse Naomi. The earliest item in the lots a small photograph of 8 drag performers, with all 8 identified on the frame verso. Although all of them were regular featured performers at Finocchio's, per a San Francisco Examiner listing dated in September 1960, 4 of the performers signed the photograph for Naomi in 1970. Here's another work from Jeb, Charlotte Bunch with members of the Furies in the living room of one of their collective houses. Charlotte Bunch was a founding member of the Furies Collective and continues her activism for women's rights today. Bunch founded and currently sits as director of the Center for Women's Global Leadership at Rutgers University. Another work by Jeb, Ginger and Catherine. This work was in a calendar for women, photographed by Jeb in 1974. Here's another work from a very early queer movie titled A Very Natural Thing. It was one of the very few mainstream movies proudly and sympathetically presenting a gay coming-of-age story released in the era of gay liberation before the onset of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. An image in pertaining to gay rights, a group of early gay rights flyers, most from New York in the 1970s and 80s. Highlights include an early mimeographed printing of a gay manifesto by Carl Whitman, and also a flyer denouncing City Council leader Tom Suit for scuttling the Intro 475 bill circa 1971, another featuring donation dance for justice to culminate in a march on the home of the councilman Saul Sharrison for blocking the same bill. And here are a few from that same lot that we offered, featuring all of those different pieces of ephemera. And this brings me to post-Stonewall, the late 70s. Here is a group of ephemera, clippings, and others, including 98 items. All were publications featuring gay news, mostly notable. The one from the article from the 29th of June, 1969, from the New York Sunday News on the Stonewall Uprising. And here are a few more images of material pertaining that lot. Here are a group of 4 photographs by Jeb celebrating lesbian life and lesbian culture. Here is a work from designer unknown, Gay and Proud. Seattle's first Gay Pride Week was held in the summer of 1974. This event was part of the second year celebrations. It wasn't until 1977 that the event began to include marches. Here is a printed pamphlet from Gay Legislation 1975 in Massachusetts. This flyer advocates for laws protecting the LGBTQ population and the repeal of sex laws, urging readers to write to their legislators, and announces Gay Americans Day at the State House. Each legislator is rated from 1 to 4. Young Representative Barney Frank is rated 1, meaning that he had supported an anti-discrimination bill last year. He is also listed as one of the many sponsors of the legislation. Frank came out publicly in 1987. A poster from Donna Pilar, Unite to Fight. For the 7th anniversary of the Stonewall riot, Pilar appropriated the image of a woman demonstrating a 1970 poster designed by Sue Negrin. That poster, printed by Times Change Press, bore a quotation of Lucy Stone from 1855. In education, in marriage, in everything, disappointment is the lot of woman. It shall be the business of my life to deepen this disappointment in every woman's heart until she bows down to it no longer. Here's a screen print poster from Tony Robertson. Tony Robertson was a founder of the Earthworks Poster Collective, a group of feminist artists at the University of Sydney in Australia from 1972 to 79. This silkscreen work that the collective produced all had a political theme: gay and lesbian rights, Aboriginal rights, protest posters, and anti-nuclear imagery. They worked in an area of the university referred to as the Sheds, prefabricated buildings from World War II. Ironically, she stopped producing art as a result of being poisoned by chemicals used in the poster making process. This image promotes the Marxism Feminism Conference in Sydney in 1977. On the bottom, printed in cursive, it reads, "A cultural image from the legendary past, tall tales and true for the Marxism Feminism Conference." Here's a line and photographic illustration from the Stonewall Romances, a 10th anniversary celebration, personal accounts of the Stonewall Uprising and social atmosphere told in collage, interviews, and poetry by Daniel Abraham, Ray Dobbins, Joe Longo, Mark Simon, Stephen Watson, and Charles Webb. A poster titled "Join Hands" from Gay Prisoners News. This is the penultimate issue of a quarterly newspaper for and about gay men in prison. It includes articles on prison rape, legal issues, and a Washington State Penitentiary group called Men Against Sexism, as well as poetry, illustrations, and a letter to editor from 1978. This illustration and book from Michael Leonard for The Joy of Gay Sex, exhibited and sold at Robert Samuel Gallery, New York, with their stamp verso. A copy of the 1977 paperback edition by Simon & Schuster accompanies the artwork. Michael Leonard's tonal drawings capture figures in motion, often doing quotidian tasks, and are a study of the subtle interactions of muscle, bone, and sinew. He completed a same-titled painting in '86. Here's another image from Jeb, a silver print, partying to mark the 5th anniversary of Lammas Women's Shop on Capitol Hill. Lammas Women's Shop became an important gathering place in the DC lesbian community, quickly turning from a jewelry store into a bookshop. Lammas offered a safe space for open discourse on the newest feminist theories of the day until its closing in 2000. Another image from documentarian Jeb, Barbara Love, T. Grace Atkinson, and Kate Millett at the Forum on the Future. Forum on the Future was a large feminist conference held in New York in '78, organized by the Foundation for the Matriarchy, co-founded by Barbara Love and Elizabeth Shanklin. Some speakers from the conference were Flo Kennedy, T. Grace, and Midge Costanza. Here's an image of Marsha P. Johnson from documentarian photographer Arlene Gottfried. Another image and a full archive of Allen Ginsberg and Hank O'Neill, the Gay Day Archive, with 120 photographs from New York City Gay Day parades spanning over the course of the late 70s and 80s. A festive visual compilation by the New York-based photographer and author Arthur O'Neill of the parade signifying the gay liberation movement. Pictured are an array of fun-loving and politically motivated participants, several openly displaying affection, with photographs of the transgender activist Marsha P. Johnson. And here are a few of the images, and on the verso of each image are a sort of text in relation to each image and describing who and what acts are being projected on the other side. Here is Too Much Graphics Collective, Never Again, Fight Back. The Briggs Initiative, known as Proposition 6, called for gay and lesbians to be banned from working in the California public state schools. Proposed by State Senator John Briggs, the referendum was resoundingly voted down on November 7, 1978. The idea for the conservative-driven Proposition 6 began with a vote in Florida relating to that piece of ephemera that I projected earlier, where Anita Bryant helped squash anti-discriminatory policies in regards to hiring school teachers. California Governor Ronald Reagan and President Jimmy Carter both opposed the bill, and Harvey Milk was instrumental in helping to defeat it. The poster was printed to help raise funds to fight for the initiative. It features an image of Silviana Nova, a noted drag persona, an actor in San Francisco during the 1970s. The text at the bottom reads, "The pink triangle was used to identify the thousands of gay people who died in concentration camps in Nazi Germany. The pink triangle was reutilized 9 years after this poster was created, albeit inverted, by the Silence Equals Death Collective on the eponymous iconic poster." Here's a small archive of personal papers relating to the 1979 March on Washington and Moore. Don Amador was a pioneering LA gay rights activist and scholar. A trained anthropologist, he taught at the nation's Gay Studies first course in 1976 and at California State University. This group of personal ephemera includes Don H. Amador, a biography. Here's a work from the Gay Response Collective, flyer protesting the filming of the movie Cruising. The film Cruising, starring Al Pacino as a policeman working undercover to track a serial killer in New York's leather scene, was filmed largely on location in Greenwich Village. The filming was met with demonstrations by the city's gay communities, objecting to their characterization and steeped in violence. Many of the film's outdoor scenes needed to be overdubbed of the noise from protesters. The flyer was evidently been taped to a neighborhood utility pole near the end of the shoot. It's not over. Cruising will be filmed tonight at 14th and 9th, just below our NYC MCC. Demonstrate, 7:30 p.m., Sheridan Square. Credit was taken by the Responsive Gay Collective and the Marshalls. Here are a group of images of various authors and artists from Christopher Street. Thank you. Christopher Street was a glossy monthly filled with coverage of current events, literature, and cartoons similar in style and scope to The New Yorker. It was described in its first issue as the gay magazine for the whole family. The run offered here is complete for issues, the first issue to the 75th. Here's another photograph from Jeb of Mabel Hampton at her desk. The demonstrative portrait captures the Harlem Renaissance dancer and lesbian activist Mabel Hampton among her collection of memorabilia documenting the social movements she fought for. Another image from Jeb, Daquita and Danita, and it appears in Jeb's landmark title, Eye to Eye, Portraits of Lesbians from 1979. The man has a big mouth. Many of these posters advocating against John Briggs and his anti-gay initiative, which appeared in the months leading up to the California elections of November 1978. Here's a poster. "If they come for me in the night, they'll come for you in the morning. Fight Briggs. No on 6 and 7. The conservative Briggs initiative was placed for the California ballot in 78 in an attempt to fire public school teachers who were gay or merely supported gay rights. And so they took this image from the persecution of the gay population in Nazi Germany. An autograph letter signed as acting mayor of San Francisco to Don Amador and Tom Keene from Harvey Milk. Though you should have a memo from the first upfront gay mayor of any city, it's for real. This note was written during a trip to Europe by San Francisco's mayor, George Moscone, with Milk serving briefly as acting mayor. The recipients were leading activist Don Amador of Los Angeles, who taught the nation's first gay studies course at California State University, and his husband, Tony Carnes. Here's a later image from Suzanne Polly of Marsha P. Johnson. A group of 13 pamphlets relating mostly to the political campaigns and remembrances of Harvey Milk and George Moscone's death, including a rare night white riot leaflet. And here is a piece of ephemera, We Shall Go Forth, a memorial tribute for Harvey Milk and George Moscone. Printed program for an event held in Los Angeles the week after Milk's assassination, listing dozens of speakers and organizers. And here is Bauer's Attorney General of Georgia. This 86 decision upheld in a ruling 5-4 the constitutionality of a Georgia law criminalizing sodomy defined as oral and anal sex between consenting gay adults. Justice White wrote the opinion of the court, with Justice Powell and Chief Justice Berger concurring. It was overturned in '03 Lawrence v. Texas. Bench opinions are issued by the U.S. Supreme Court immediately after the announcement of a decision. Slip opinions are issued afterwards. And for my final slide, 2 pieces of ephemera from the March on Washington, the first National March on Washington 1979, and a poster for the second march. And that's the end of my presentation. Please let me know if there are any questions at all, please.
I have one. Did you tell us where this collection came from and if it was compiled by Swan or did someone else compile it and what happened to it?
So all of the works that were featured in this presentation are pieces of material culture that has been offered over the past 5 iterations of the department that I am associate director of. We get these works on consignment from private collectors, a few institutions, but mostly private collectors of literally queer men, queer women who have lived through these experiences and who have wanted to find a second home for all of this material. So this was compiled from the very first auction, which was held in 2019 during the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots, which was known as World Pride, which was the beginning of the auctions up until 2024, which was last year's iteration of this auction. And so we have an interesting niche within the market, within Swan and in this department, that the visibility are from private collectors and public institutions who bid on these works.
Thank you, Corey. It was terrific, and it was nice to see a lot of pieces that we worked on together. It was great. So I had a question for you. I remember a lot of posters and printed material for the HIV crisis, and I wonder if you didn't have a lot of it in your presentation. I'm wondering why. My first guess is that there's a lot of it printed. It would be very hard to kind of contextualize and represent. So could you speak to that a little bit and sort of the scarcity or abundance of those printed pieces?
It's my pleasure. So in thinking of conflict and resolution of the gay liberation movement, I really wanted a clear, concise period. I broke this presentation down into pre-Stonewall to get a sense of what life was like before Stonewall for the LGBT plus community members who were activists and active within the Daughters of Abilities and the Masterteen Society, but also for gay men and women who were not out of the closet and who were unable to come out of the closet and sort of to bring their stories to light. And then I divided up into the second section of Stonewall, which was anything from 1969 up until 1974. So material culture pertaining to the Stonewall and its proliferation. And then post-Stonewall, anything going into the late 1970 into 1979. And so 79 was my cutoff year because that is the beginning of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. And so the HIV/AIDS epidemic and material culture from that period is a presentation in of itself. And honestly, it exists, but it is very scarce because a lot of people that lived through that or lived within that period did not see the end of it, unfortunately. And so that is another presentation for another day.